Hello, hello. I am back for another Automation on a Mission Business Booster session. And in this training, we're going to talk about filling your 2025 marketing content calendar. So specifically what we're going to be talking about is how to use content planning as a means of setting yourself up for success, both in terms of consistency in how you're creating content, as well as consistency on moving towards, achieving your goals through the content that you're creating. All right, so let's dive in. Let me share my screen right fast. And we are off, I believe. Here we go. So the goal is to be able to plan content that helps you grow your business, engage your audience, all that kind of good stuff by doing a little bit of planning ahead. Now, I want to start by saying this does not have to be terrible. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be scary. It also doesn't have to take away your ability to be free or flexible, go with the flow, or to change your mind at any given time. But the goal is to try to sort of have a big picture vision and a direction that you're moving. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like and how it works. So the power of strategic content planning. So first of all, one of the things that I have really loved about doing this myself in our business has been around helping make sure that there's consistency in the messaging that we are creating, and that they are all things that drive us towards those business goals. So an unintended positive consequence of having all of this stuff already laid out in advance is that when we have brought in team members to start to create social media content for us, now all of a sudden, they didn't have just my brain to get the information from. They had a clear brand identity. They had a clear set of goals that we were working towards. They had a content plan to follow, and then the rest was up to them to sort of decide exactly how that plays out. What does it look like? What does our structure and our schedule look like? That sort of thing. So if you look back at Automation on a Mission and Confluence Business Solutions over this last year, and I have to identify both of those things because this was the year that we changed our name. If you look back at this previous year, you'll find that the structure, the tone changed throughout the year a couple of different times. And that was in large part simply because we were experimenting with different things. The vision and the goal was always the same, but we were experimenting with different strategies and approaches to see what was going to be most effective and what would work best for us. So one of the things, so as you think about how building a content plan for 2025 can help and support your business goals, one of the things it does is it brings your messaging and your goals together. So when you have those two things serving the same purpose and the same function, you don't find that you're seeing growth in areas that you didn't want to have growth in, because every time you create another piece of content, it should be in alignment with one of your business goals, and not this like, oh, I just started doing this random stuff out of the blue and so on and so forth. It's also a really great strategy for avoiding overwhelm, or also a great strategy for helping you overcome writer's block or imposter syndrome, or any of those other things that sometimes prevent us from showing up our very best in our business. And what I mean by that is, today maybe things are looking great and you're like, yeah, I can totally do this, create a post or a blog or an email every single day. And then the pipeline gets full and you have a lot of different things going on at the same time, or maybe you've launched this new program, or something has shifted in your business that this season in the business maybe is a little bit more hectic than others, or maybe you're just having an off day, which you're allowed to have, for the record, and it doesn't change the fact that the goals are still there. The personal expectations that we have for ourselves are still present, but now maybe we don't have to bring, all 100% to the party. We can bring, 70% or 60%, because the other 40% or more has been done in advance when we sat down and we created our content plan. Now, your content plan can be as broad or as specific as you want it to be. It's totally up to you. And my recommendation is always going to be start big and get more specific. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next several minutes. It helps streamline your marketing efforts and reinforces your brand. So one of the things that I started doing a couple of years ago, and we're going to talk about this in here as well, is around identifying what are the themes, the key topics that we talk about. And again, not only is it helping serve our business goals, but it's also reinforcing exactly who we are and what we do, and helps maintain that consistency. If I start talking about underwater basket weaving, I'm pretty sure you're gonna be like, I think she's having a midlife crisis, or maybe an identity crisis. Some kind of crisis is occurring if Christy is talking about underwater basket weaving and not automation. So when you start seeing things that are totally out of alignment, something weird might be going on. Does that make sense? And then it helps you stay visible and top of mind. So a lot of times we create tons of promises for ourselves, and it's not always easy for us to deliver. But staying top of mind never stops being an important and relevant thing in our business. So again, the content planning is saying, this is how I'm going to show up in my business. This is how I'm going to show up for my prospects and my clients. And maintaining that consistency helps ensure that our ideal client doesn't forget who we are. So let's talk a little bit about aligning your content with your goals. So first and foremost, we've done previous trainings about goal setting. You can take a look in our Business Booster library to see our other trainings on this topic, including recent ones in the last couple of weeks. But the goal is that you sit down and you create your goals. So reflect on what's been going on in this current 2024 year. Reflect on, what did I set out to do? What did I actually achieve? And that should then help influence the goals that you're creating for 2025. But you do that first. Create your goals before you sit down and create your content plan, because all of the things that you create in your content should be towards making your goals your guide. So everything that you say in your content plan and content strategy should be in some way connected to those goals and driving you towards achieving those goals. So here's what we mean by that. So number one is you're going to create your big, hairy, audacious goal. You're going to say, these are the things I'm going to do to achieve those things. You're going to say, I need to have this kind of lead growth, this kind of lead generation in my business. This is the number of clients I need to be bringing on per month in these kinds of programs, and maybe creating a couple of different scenarios about what that looks like. And then you're able to then measure the content towards those goals. So I don't have a slide for this, but I don't think I do. This should be something that you think about. What is the content that we're talking about? Content can be email marketing. Content can be newsletters. It can be blogging, podcasting. It can be social media creation and organic posting. And it could also be paid ads. It could be direct mail. It could be you attending events. All of those things are moving you towards ways to generate business, ways to close sales, ways for you to grow and achieve your goals. And so all of the content that you create in any one of those channels should be moving you towards these goals. So if you are like, I've got this piece of content that I want to put out there, and you're not really clear on how it helps serve the greater good of in your business towards achieving these things, then perhaps there's not a fit. So that's one way to think about it. All right. So when it comes to deciding what kind of content you want to create in your business, I want you to be thinking about these things. So number one, what are the topics that interest you or interest your ideal client the most? And when it comes to knowing what those things are, guess what the first step is? Guess. And now I'm talking to myself here. So I'm gonna give you the answer. It is knowing who your ideal client is. So the same recurring theme shows up again and again and again in all of the training content that we talk about. And that is know who your ideal client is. And when I say that, I mean not just demographics. I work with women. I work with middle-aged women. I work with so on and so forth. But understand what are the purchase drivers. Understand what are their decision-making details. What are the things that are going to help them see the transformation that you're creating in their lives, whether that's personal, whether that's business, doesn't matter. Knowing who it is that you are serving helps you then create content that is the most interesting to them. So again, as I've said this probably at least a dozen times just in the last quarter, if you are trying to serve everyone, it's not easy, but it's not even possible for you to identify topics that interest everyone, because nothing interests everyone. But if you can get specific about who it is that you serve and generate content specifically for them, you are well on your way. So for those of you that serve multiple customer avatars, consider then creating content that specifically is for them. So for example, and we had a team member for a while whose job was lead generation in one of our new verticals, wedding planners. And she was all about dismantling everything that we've built up and created in our LinkedIn profile and on our Facebook business page. And at a certain point, I can see why she says those things, because we want to make sure that they see themselves in that content. But wedding planners are not the only audience that we serve. So if we only start talking to wedding planners, what happens to all the other amazing service providers that we are working with? If we start only talking to plumbers, what happens to the wedding planners? So we need to make sure that, yes, we create content specifically for that particular industry or that particular customer avatar, but we also want to make sure that we're not neglecting the others as well. So there's an example of, yes, you might have two different versions of your customer avatar, create content for both. And it doesn't mean that you have to do double duty. It just means that every time you create a piece of content that you are serving one of those ideal clients in particular. And when you start to notice the trends or patterns, are you showing neglect to one, by playing favoritism towards the other, or are you successfully balancing out your content so that no matter what, you're speaking to one of those two customer avatars? Another thing, I want to be totally transparent, this is an area that we are experimenting in, but to address the fact that we've got multiple customer avatars, one of the things that we've done is create a private Facebook group for one of those customer avatars. And there, the content gets to be specifically for them. They know that if they show up in that group, they're going to get content specifically and just for those specific interests. So just something to think about. So what are the things that interest them the most? What are their struggles? And if you can speak their language, you're going to get so much more impact, so much more traction with the content you're creating. So last week I did a presentation with a group of my ideal client, and I said to them, how many of you, the other interesting thing about the group was half of them were already members of Automation on a Mission. And I said to them, how many of you have said in the past, when it comes to these things that we do, there's got to be a better way? And resounding hands up. And I said, you want to know how I know that? Number one, because you're my ideal client. But number two, because that was my gateway into this world of automation. So the way I started to build those systems and processes in my own business, in my own world, in my own life, was because I had a struggle with too many platforms. The technology was not working for me the way it was, and I was never able to sort of stay up to date with what I was trying to build and create. And my exact words at that moment were, there's got to be a better way. So how do you speak the language of your ideal client? What are the things that they are saying? And if you're not sure, then maybe do some discovery calls with your ideal client and ask them. And the best people to do that with are people you're already working with. So what solutions are they looking for? Again, transformation sells. We don't buy a product. We don't buy the nuts and the bolts. We buy the experience. We buy the transformation, and we buy it from people we know, like, and trust. So making sure that we're talking about our solutions is going to help us make sure that our content is so much more effective. And again, that's email, that's social media, that's direct mail, that's podcast, that's blogging, all of those things. So again, if you go back and you look at Automation on a Mission's blog series that's been going on for years and years and years, I can tell you, I am not going to run out of topics anytime soon. Why? Because you guys are a wealth of information. You're a wealth of resources for me. What are you struggling with? What are the questions that you have? And every so often, when I sit down to, do a little bit more content planning for, like a block of time, I think about what are the patterns and the trends that we're seeing. And specifically, our blogs are written for you. They're written to help address the issues that you all deal with. So when it comes to getting down and rolling your sleeves up and getting started on the work, I wanted to have a visual representation of how you might think about creating content for your business. So first and foremost, remember we've got our BHAG, which might sit up here, and then we've got the goals that we're identifying specifically to help us reach that big, hairy, audacious goal for the year. And then maybe we get our goals, have a series of objectives. And those objectives are things like, maybe one goal is, I want to launch a group coaching program. And then your objectives are to, be in a certain number of networking calls per week, or maybe it's to incorporate a 6-month long-term nurture strategy that helps move people towards your group coaching program. Those would be objectives that serve goal 1. And then, and then we're going to do those same things with goals 2 and goals 3. Now that we've got our goals complete, now it's time to start looking at how do we identify the things that we talk about. So in our previous slide, we talked about topics that interest, identifying and calling out the challenges that they face, or the other way to put this is, what problems are you solving for your ideal client, and then what does transformation look like on the other side. So now that we have those pieces of awareness, all of our content pillars should be achieving those things. And so what do I mean when I think about a content pillar? So content pillars are like themes. So the theme of, you may have multiple themes. So let's say, for example, you are a weight loss coach. Maybe one of your content pillars is about, mindset. What if it was like mindset in the mirror? So it has to do with like loving yourself and looking in the mirror. And maybe that's too granular. I'm not sure. I'm not a weight loss coach. But maybe one thing is around mindset. Maybe another content pillar is around what you do in terms of physical movement. Maybe a third pillar is around diet. Maybe the fourth one is around weight management. So it's about the numbers on the scale and the BMI and something like that. So now I've got my 4 topics, my themes that I can talk about. And then I can start to think about what are some of the specific ideas that I can talk about in that one theme. So we said mindset. Maybe one is mindset in the mirror. Maybe another one is how to maintain your mindset when your weight plateaus. Maybe another one is what to do about mindset when it comes to a fancy event and having to try on dresses. The ideas could go on and on and on. So if you're doing a pillar on exercise, maybe a topic is around exercise in menopause, or about bone density, or maybe it's around how to give rest days and be okay with it, or just how to give rest days. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about here. Notice nothing I just gave you was so specific that you could just take it and run with it. They're ideas, they're concepts. And so the pillar is the big thing. It's the mindset, exercise, diet, and I forget what my fourth one was in my weight loss example. So again, we are high level at this point. Next, I want you to be thinking about how you can create content for the different stages of the buyer journey. So we've talked a lot at different stages in our trainings around the buyer journey. The buyer journey is essentially saying that in our process, our 3 buckets, you're in that place where you're not ready to buy yet, and you're learning about us, and also we're attracting you, we're bringing you in. We typically show this as a picture of a magnet. And so when we're creating content for those people, we're creating content for people who've not signed on yet. They've not said they want to work with us. And so we are introducing concepts. So this is like the beginner level stuff, right? Whereas when you move into identifying content for the sell stage, this is where you start to share, specific resources. Maybe you're offering a program. Just because it's called sell does not mean that you have to have a price tag associated with it. Maybe this is also like a group workshop that leads to a paid program. So it's totally up to you as to how you want to sort of like differentiate one versus another. But the goal is that you're making sure that you create content that covers each one of these stages. So as you're building traction with collecting testimonials and getting success stories, your success stories can be provided by your client. You can also write your own success stories, write your own case studies based on what you see. It's up to you as to whether or not you want to get permission to share, personal details, or just sort of keep it high level. I prefer to keep it high level. It tends to make things a lot more interesting, except for when I get to talk about my hot tub dudes, because I always want to give them a little shout out. But my point being that when you create your content, we want to make sure that, just like we don't want to play favorites in terms of our specific content pillars, we also don't want to play favorites when it comes to only serving one of these 3 buckets. So making sure that our content is well balanced. We want stuff that's going to help bring awareness. We want stuff that's going to help move them towards making a purchase. And then we also want to show what transformation looks like from the eyes and the mouths of our ideal client, and the people that we're working with. All right. So how do you go about putting your stuff on paper or on computer? So here is, and I kind of talked through this a couple of minutes ago when we were talking about our content pillars. So content pillar 1, mindset. Content pillar 2, exercise. Content pillar 3, diet. And then content pillar 4, I forget what that one was. I don't see, this is what happens when you make it up on the fly. So now that we've got our content pillar, what are some of those topics? Now I've got ideas of things that I can be pulling from. And the cool thing is, what if you have a blog and a social media, your blog goes out in your email. Now I've got 3 different ways that I'm touching people on this one topic. You can make the theme of a week this one topic. You can also say this theme is being pushed out on week 1, and this theme is being pushed out on week 2, and this one on week 3, for example. And when I say pushed out, maybe this is blog and email. Week 1, week 2, week 3. But social media, this is week 1, this is week 2, this is week 3. So you don't have to be like, oh my God, if I have to say one more thing about this particular topic, I'm going to pull my own hair out. I'm bored with myself. Diversify how you organize that content in terms of how you share it with the different social medias, for example, or the different avenues that you might be reaching people. One of the things that I learned from one of our team members is, she creates content for our social media channels, for example. And she says, okay, so these are the posts that we're going to use this week, but she doesn't post the same thing on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. And I think that's really smart. What she does is she says, this one goes out on Facebook on this day, but it goes out on Instagram on this day. And it allows for people to see different stuff from us depending on what channel. Because in an ideal world, the people who follow us on Facebook are also following us on Instagram or also on LinkedIn. And so they're getting different value from different places. And also, it then allows you to tweak that content a little bit to make it more relevant for that particular channel. You can do the same thing with social media, email, podcasting, vlogging, all of that sort of thing, your Facebook lives, et cetera, et cetera. You could be talking about this topic in your podcast and this topic on your blog and this topic on social media. And by the end of the week, everything gets covered, and flipped on its head. So it's totally up to you how you want to do it. But the goal in this particular step is you've got your content pillars identified. Now we're going to start coming up with topics. And if you're lacking in creativity or inspiration today, use ChatGPT for this. This is the stuff that ChatGPT is really good at. So, one second. Oh, thirsty. So let's say, for example, you can get yourself as far as identifying your content pillars. If you use the term content pillar in ChatGPT, they know exactly what you're talking about. The algorithm or the AI knows what that concept is. And if you feel like you're not on the same page, ask it to, define that, and you can get on the same page with ChatGPT and then move forward to helping you generate topics. So I have used ChatGPT to say, okay, give me 12 topics for this one content pillar. And then I can tweak and massage that. Those topics just from ChatGPT could very well inspire you to create another 10 or 12 topics simply because they've generated new ideas. So use AI if you need to help you create a bunch of ideas. And I would say, at a minimum, do your best to create your content for the first quarter of the year. And then, halfway through your first quarter, sit down and do your second quarter. And halfway through your second quarter, sit down and do your third quarter. The goal is that you have created as much of this in advance as possible. Because again, you can't guarantee today what your schedule is going to look like when you're in the weeds. So last week, we had a bit of a snafu. Tuesday came and went. And I realized that not only did our blog not go out, it also didn't get written. And the week that happened could not have been a worse week because there was so much going on our entire team. So yeah, did we get one out? Yep. But it also went out a day late, and which then ultimately degrades trust. It breaks down that consistency that we're trying to keep. And I also wanted to share it because nobody is perfect. And I didn't just say, oh, well, screw it. I just ate that cupcake and therefore all my calories are ruined. It was, okay, well, let's get back on the horse. What's the topic we need to cover? And we could lean on all of the stuff that we've created. It wasn't so difficult or impossible for us to rebound. Okay. So our topics are things that we want to try to get nailed down as, well in advance, so that we're not struggling with creativity, generating content, pushing it out and executing all at the same time. It's so much, and it's inefficient. So one of the things that really helps when you do content batching is you get yourself into the mindset. And part of that mindset is idea creation. You can also then do time blocking and content batching. Now that I've had a batching session around creating my topics, now I'm going to have a batching session around creating my blogs. Now I'm going to have a batching session around creating my social media content. And then you can put those things in a safe place, or even schedule them in advance if you want to, totally up to you, so that you have all that stuff ready to rock and roll, so that regardless as to how busy your schedule is, you've got the stuff that you need to maintain that consistency. All right, next. So we've gone from a broad, concept, getting increasingly more granular. So next is we're going to take those content ideas and turn them into specific topics that we are going to cover. So we're going to either transfer over what we already have into a schedule, or we're going to get a little bit more specific about exactly what that topic means, because maybe a topic could be something that could be broken down into 5 different pieces of content. It's totally up to you how you want to organize that. But then all I did was I just put a little calendar here, just as an example of what that might look like. I am going to show you before we wrap up what my content calendar looks like and how I use Asana to manage this particular point. But use, whatever format or tool you need. The goal is just so that you have a big picture way of looking at what you have created, where you essentially run out of content, if that's the case, and what you need to do to keep things moving. All right. So things that you might be able to bring in to help you with consistency. I've kind of already talked about it, is blocking off time for batching content. So blocking off time for identifying your content pillars, check. Blocking off time for identifying your goals before you create your content pillars, check. Blocking off time for batching content and brainstorming content ideas, check. Blocking off time for identifying what's going to go out in each one of those particular topic ideas, like whether that's in social media or it's in email, so on and so forth. Blocking off time for creating the content that goes in each one of those things. So identify the places that you're going to push out your content and the quantity of pieces of content based on what you can realistically be successful in. And if you have never done this before, my recommendation is to start small. You are better able to start small and build a habit around it and then grow from there than you are to say, I'm going to create a social media post every single day. I'm going to get out 3 emails a day. I'm going to do a newsletter and a podcast and so on and so forth. It always makes me cringe when I see the number of people who start a podcast and don't make it more than just a couple of months, because it is a lot of work. And we have a tendency to overcommit and then underestimate how much time those things take. And my challenge to you is start small and do one thing at a time. And when I say that, what I mean is commit to one thing. And when you know what that one thing is and are able to do it consistently, then add another. So for example, when we started pushing out content, I started with one blog, and it was, I'm going to do a blogging when I have an idea. Then it was, I'm going to get a blog out every other week. And then once that became habitual, I'm going to get a blog out every single week. And then it was, now we're going to start doing a newsletter every other week. So the goal is, and that's just one section, that doesn't include our social media content. It doesn't include anything else that we do to increase our brand visibility or lead generation, client attraction, spotlighting our clients, all of those things. But what we do is we make sure that if we tell our community, whether it's customers or prospects, that we're going to do something, that it's something that we can achieve, so that we're not breaking our promises. So I want you to be thinking about what can you successfully maintain on a regular basis, and then batch or block off time for batching that content. Wherever possible, use automation. So in Automation on a Mission, you have a social media scheduler, you have our email tool, and then you also have the automation builder. You could create a year's worth of newsletter content and schedule it so that it doesn't matter, who, what, when, where, how. When they come in, they enter the right portion of your newsletter automation delivery and they get the right stuff. you can totally do all of those things. And then the last piece that we've not done a ton about right now is pay attention to your metrics and your engagement. I know that when I put something on Instagram, I'm the only one that sees it. Why? Because Instagram doesn't like me. I don't know why. So at this point, like, I don't expect a whole lot of success there because I've devoted tons of time, money, energy in experimenting, testing, so on and so forth. And for one reason or another, it's not an effective platform for me. So I don't spend a lot of time here. And the reason I know that is because I've paid attention to my metrics. So make sure that if you are committing to like a weekly email, for example, that you go back and you look at those open rates, you check your click-through rate, you are attentive to engagement of your list, that you're attentive to engagement in a particular piece of content, because all that's going to do is help you learn what kind of content do people want to see and hear the most. So our sweet spot, automation. What do people engage with and enjoy the most that we write about? Business mindset. So, you know, it also could be because automation is not the sexiest topic, but doesn't mean that those things are not helpful. And if I write about something related to mindset and it gets you to look at our blog and then you stumble on something else that helps you grow your business, mission accomplished. All right, so next I want you to monitor what works. So this is what we were talking about in terms of those evaluations. And I don't know what happened to my pumpkins. They got a little messed up there, I think. Yeah, a little bit messed up, but it's okay. So track exposure, engagements, likes, shares, encourage people to share your posts, share your newsletter, share your blog, et cetera, et cetera. Monitor those conversion rates. So not only are we looking at how many people are opening our emails, how many people are seeing our social media posts, but what one of those things is converting somebody to visit your website or to make a sale. And then take that information and use that to adjust what kind of content you create. So I like writing about mindset. I actually enjoy it a lot more than writing about automation, but I think that's mainly because I know that's what our interests our audience. And so, and I understand those struggles. So let's talk about those things, but I'm gonna make sure that I continue to stay up to date with what's working and what's not for our readers, and then adjusting accordingly. All right, so that is everything I had to share today about creating a content calendar that works for you and your business. As always, I hope it is helpful. I hope that I was able to answer some questions. If you need support around this, please don't hesitate to pop into the Facebook group, ask your questions, get a conversation going. It's the best way to also see what other people are doing as well. Maybe somebody will share some sort of insight. Oh, and I almost forgot to share with you how we actually do our content planning in our stuff. So I am going to share my screen one more time. So we use Asana for all of our project management stuff. And in our Asana boards, one of our projects is Automation on a Mission Content Planner. So it's different than where we go to manage our tasks. And part of why I love this is it makes it really easy for us to see when do we have touches going out, whether that's social media, whether that's our newsletter and our blog stuff. And really, at the moment, the thing that seems to matter the most for us is knowing what topics we're talking about and making sure that we know who's covering it and when. So for example, it is November 18th. We had a newsletter go out on Thursday. We've got a blog going out. Here's a sneak preview. We're going to talk about 7 things I can't even remember. I was doing if I started my business all over again. So this is the second time I've written about something similar to this. This is a really beneficial topic for a lot of people that are just getting started. So is it business building? Yes. Is it mindset? Yes. Win, win. And then when it comes to things like our newsletter, what are the things that we can organize in advance? So we have, sections of our newsletter every time we send out a newsletter. And this, our content blocking is specifically around trying to help us come up with like a unified theme and know exactly what those things are that we're talking about. So that's just an example. Is it the right way for you? I can't really say. So you decide whether or not that works for you. And again, feel free to pop into the Facebook group if you have any questions. Thanks so much. Until next time.